What is good? Osiris here, stuck in the middle. The power of culture has the creator of Friends bowing to the altar of that religion, also known as critical theory of race. Friends creator apologizes for racism of popular sitcom, pledges millions to black education. Which sitcom are we talking about? Friends from the 90s. You know Friends had funny episodes like when Rachel made that bad dessert.
For my dessert, I have chosen to make a traditional English trifle. There's more lady fingers than beef sauteed with peas and onions.
This is so good that I'm gonna go enjoy it on the balcony.
I'm gonna go into the bathroom so I can look at it in the mirror as I eat it.
Just good, wholesome humor. So I'm looking at it like racism. Wow. I liked Friends. Friends is one of the best sitcoms I've ever seen. Probably my top 50 or so, but up there. Really good show. And I'm like, I don't remember racism. It's funny. I don't remember that being a racist show at all. But still, the power of bending your knee to this altar, this cult, this religion. Marta Kauffman, the co-creator of the hit 90s TV sitcom Friends, is apologizing for the whiteness of the show's characters.
Spider sense start tingling.
And pledged to give millions of dollars to support black education. Hey, as far as pledging to give money for black education, that's fine. That's not really even my point here. What is she apologizing for? The funny thing is, Marta couldn't articulate what she was apologizing for either. The whiteness of the show. Marta said, "It took me a long time to begin to understand how I internalized systemic racism." Kauffman said, per Brandeis, "I've been working really hard to become an ally and an anti-racist."
Because everyone claims that they're not racist. We're either being racist or we're being anti-racist.
And this seemed to me to be a way that I could participate in the conversation from a white woman's perspective. Normal people don't talk like this. She sounds like she's a hostage victim or she's making a statement under duress. She said, "I'm embarrassed that I didn't know better 25 years ago," explaining that the death of George Floyd in 2020 prompted her to reevaluate her outlook on the world. Odd how a criminal disobeying police, tragically killed, don't want to see anybody killed, but how his death could make you reevaluate one of the best sitcoms of all times. And whether you liked it or not, financially, in syndication, people have spoken. They love the show. It's one of the most successful sitcoms ever. Why are you apologizing for that? She determines that she suffers from internalized systemic racism and participated in it, prompting a course correction. So what it looks like to me is the death of George Floyd was a convenient opportunity to accelerate this psyop that we're all in right now. Let's dig deeper into this psychological operation that's going on. Friends was a sitcom in the 90s. The state of race relations in the 90s was healthier and more organic. People cared whether a show was good or not more than the skin color of the actors.
In the 90s, I believe definitely when it comes to this racism bullshit and all of that, we were over that. You look at like the media, why it was so much better, because it was able to be basically consumed by anybody, right? You had casts that were all fucking black, that were loved by people that were of different races, be it in the Martins of the world, be it in the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, be it in all these even the UPN stuff. That was all awesome. But then you also had like fucking Married with Children and Seinfeld, which had more basically almost exclusively white cast, but they were liked by everybody. We were already over this.
That can't be replicated today because now what we have is something else replacing quality of education, quality of entertainment, culturally. None of this is Republican, Democrat politics. This is all the power of culture, but it is tied into people who want control. Back in the 90s, black identitarians were about black empowerment, not white hate. If you didn't like someone, you just didn't mess with them.
We never looked at people at this color and stuff like that. If we didn't like somebody, it's probably because they were just an asshole. We was also not raised to be pussies and offended by everything. If somebody didn't like you, your mom would be like, quit being a bitch and go find somebody else to kick it with. And we did. It was the greatest era ever. Like, we never knew so much about racism till now.
Everything now is forced. Marta's apology was forced. She can't even articulate what she's apologizing for. She's using vague terms like systemic racism or the whiteness of the show. What does that mean, Marta? When things weren't as forced, we had more organic entertainment. So why is all this stuff happening where everyone has to bow? Includes me, you listening. Everybody has to bow to the altar of this religion of critical theory of gender or race. What Marta is doing is bowing to equity over meritocracy. Her sitcom was successful, but meritocracy is hell to this religion. Equity is utopia. Utopia is heaven to members of this cult. And they want everyone in the world to be a member of this cult. Secretary of State Tony Blinken tweeted the other day, responsible nations must not shrink from scrutiny of their human rights record. Rather, they should be transparent with the intent to grow and do better. That is why I'm announcing a formal invitation for at UN special rapporteur on contemporary forms of racism to visit the U.S.
Both my mandate as special rapporteur and that of the working group are global, and you've tasked us with maintaining focus on the broad range of issues that arise under the umbrella of racial discrimination and intolerance. The world is witnessing the largest ever transnational mobilization against systemic racism in law enforcement, sparked by the chilling images of the police killing of George Floyd.
Marta created one of the greatest sitcoms of all time, but has to apologize for that merit because of her lack of equity. So now that Marta has apologized and now she agrees that equity should be more important than the merit of the show, whether people like it or not, she is now a soldier fighting against this idea of systemic racism. But she's just a foot soldier. The only entity powerful enough to bring in this utopia of equity to reality is the government.
I may be luckier than you, you may be luckier than I, but if the government says we're going to be equal, then it needs enormous powers of coercion to make you go down and me go up.
And like any religion, there's always contradictions. The same government that brought in the systemic racism that you're talking about is the same government that you're turning to right now to eliminate it. But that explains why in America, anyone who disagrees with critical theory of race or gender, you are a threat to democracy.
Inflation is an important story. We need to address how Americans are struggling to pay their bills. But the idea that inflation is a bigger story than the ongoing threat to our democracy is incredibly dangerous, because if we don't understand the threat to our democracy today, then we don't have a functioning democracy tomorrow.
Because the government is the one that's supposed to bring in equity. If you don't agree with the idea of equity, then you don't agree with critical theory, and then you can't be a part of the government. This religion is a creative psyop. It was used to replace faith in God with faith in government. They've turned government into the god of a religion, and their followers don't even realize it.